A brave little boy saved a millionaire's daughter. But the millionaire's reaction horrifies the boy. Marcus Harris had learned one hard truth by the age of 16. Survival didn't care about dreams, warmth, or fairness. His sneakers were so worn the soles barely held together, and the cold pierced through his hand-me-down coat like needles. His apartment? A single, crumbling room without enough heat to chase away the frost that crept in through the cracked windows. Some days, Marcus thought the winter cold was better company than the gnawing hunger that never truly left his stomach. But it wasn't the biting chill or his empty fridge that Marcus feared most. It was the silence. The way it filled his little flat, thick and suffocating, reminding him just how alone he was. His mother worked endless shifts at the diner. His father? A question no one cared to answer. And Marcus? He was the one who kept the lights on, the one who made sure the bills didn't pile too high, doing whatever odd jobs the neighbors threw his way. Tonight, with darkness swallowing the streets and frost crunching underfoot, Marcus wasn't out for himself. He'd just finished shoveling a driveway for the old couple down the block, his breath puffing in frozen clouds as he made his way home. As Marcus cut through the local park, his footsteps crunching against the snow, he heard something that made him stop dead in his tracks. "Help! Somebody help!" The voice was faint but unmistakable. A desperate, panicked cry for assistance. Marcus scanned the dimly lit park, his heart hammering. In the distance, near the frozen lake, he spotted a group of kids gathered near the shore. He took off running. When he reached the edge of the lake, the scene that greeted him sent a chill through his spine. A girl in a red coat was thrashing in the water, her cries growing weaker as the icy lake swallowed her inch by inch. Her small hands clawed at the jagged ice, which crumbled with every attempt she made to pull herself up. "She's gonna drown!" one boy shouted, pacing back and forth on the shore. "Why aren't you helping her?" Marcus yelled, already yanking off his coat and dropping his backpack to the ground. The kids exchanged guilty glances, but didn't move. "The ice is too thin," one of them mumbled. "We'll fall in, too." Marcus didn't wait for an answer. He dropped to his hands and knees, carefully distributing his weight as he crawled onto the fragile surface. The ice creaked ominously, threatening to give way under his weight. But he ignored it. "Hey!" he called to the girl. "Stay still! I'm coming!" Her wide eyes locked onto his, her face pale and terrified. Marcus could see her lips turning blue. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn back. But he couldn't leave her. Not when she was so close to the edge. "Reach for me," he said, stretching his arm out as far as he could. The girl's trembling fingers barely brushed his, but it was enough. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing her wrist and pulling with every ounce of strength he had. The ice groaned, spiderweb cracks spreading beneath them. With a final heave, he dragged her onto the surface and scrambled backward, clutching her against his chest. "Hang on!" he panted, scooting them both toward the shore. The kids helped pull them the rest of the way, their faces pale with relief. Marcus laid the girl on the snow, his own chest heaving from the effort. She was soaked to the bone, her small frame shivering violently. "We need to get her warm," Marcus said, wrapping his coat around her. "Where's her house?" The other kids exchanged nervous glances. "She's not from around here," one boy admitted. "She was just visiting for the day." "We don't know her address," Marcus groaned, glancing down at the girl. Her eyes fluttered open, barely focusing on his face. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost inaudible. "Emma, can you tell me where you live?" She shook her head weakly, her teeth chattering. "Cold," she murmured. Marcus knew there wasn't time to waste. "I live nearby," he told the group. "I'm taking her to my house to warm up. Someone needs to call her parents." Before anyone could object, Marcus scooped her into his arms and started jogging toward his apartment. Emma was lighter than he expected, but carrying her through the snow was no easy task. His breath came in gasps, his arms burning from the strain, but he refused to stop. When they finally reached his building, Marcus kicked the door open with his foot and carried Emma up the creaky staircase to his unit. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, just a couch, a coffee table, and a space heater struggling to warm the frigid air. He set Emma down on the couch and grabbed the thickest blanket he could find, wrapping it tightly around her. "Stay here," he said, his voice steady but urgent. He darted into the kitchen, grabbing a chipped mug and filling it with hot water from the kettle. As he returned to the living room, he saw Emma looking around, her wide eyes taking in the modest surroundings. "Drink this," Marcus said, holding the mug to her lips. She sipped slowly, her hands too weak to hold the mug on her own. As the warmth spread through her, a faint color returned to her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still trembling. Marcus nodded, grabbing his old flip phone from the counter. "We need to call your parents. Do you know their number?" Emma hesitated, her eyes welling with tears. "My dad. His number's in my backpack, but I left it at the park." Marcus cursed under his breath. "Okay, don't worry. We'll figure it out." Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment door. Marcus froze, his heart pounding. The knock came again, louder this time. Cautiously, he opened the door to find a tall man in a tailored coat standing in the hallway. His face was hard, his piercing gaze locking onto Marcus immediately. "Where's my daughter?" the man demanded, his voice cold and sharp. The man at the door was imposing, his broad shoulders filling the narrow hallway. His perfectly tailored coat screamed wealth, but his stormy expression sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "Where's my daughter?" he repeated, his tone like ice. Marcus hesitated for a split second before stepping aside, revealing Emma wrapped in a blanket on the couch. "Emma!" the man exclaimed, rushing past Marcus and kneeling beside her. His demeanor shifted instantly from cold to frantic as he gently cupped her face in his hands. "Dad," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible, her father's jaw clenched, his fingers trembling slightly as he inspected her face and arms. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she murmured. "Just cold." Mr. Darrow, Marcus recognized him from the news, turned his sharp gaze back to Marcus, who stood awkwardly by the door. "What happened? Why is my daughter here? And why wasn't I called sooner?" Marcus held his ground, though his palms were sweating. "She fell through the ice at the park," he explained. "Nobody else was doing anything, so I helped her out and brought her here to warm up. She couldn't remember your number, and her backpack was left at the park." Mr. Darrow's eyes narrowed. "You just decided to bring her here?" Marcus frowned, a flicker of frustration flaring in his chest. "She was freezing. She needed help. What was I supposed to do? Leave her there?" Emma tugged weakly at her father's sleeve. "Dad, he saved me," she said, her voice soft but insistent. Mr. Darrow's expression softened slightly as he looked at his daughter. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "All right. Thank you for helping her. But you should have contacted the police or medical professionals immediately." Marcus bit back a retort, reminding himself this man was just scared for his daughter. "She's okay now, but you might want to take her to a doctor just to be safe." Mr. Darrow nodded, standing up and pulling out his phone. He dialed a number, pacing the small apartment as he spoke. "Yes, this is Charles Darrow. I need my driver at 415 West End immediately. Have a doctor meet us at the estate." The words estate felt like a foreign language in Marcus's world. He looked down at his scuffed sneakers and frayed hoodie, feeling the sharp contrast between their lives. After ending the call, Mr. Darrow turned back to Emma. "The car will be here in a few minutes. Just hold on, sweetheart." He wrapped the blanket tighter around her before turning his attention back to Marcus. "Thank you for what you did," he said, though his tone was more formal than warm. "Most people wouldn't have stepped in." Marcus shrugged, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's not a big deal. I just did what anyone should have done." "That may be true," Mr. Darrow said, "but very few people actually do it." Before Marcus could respond, there was another knock at the door. Mr. Darrow opened it to reveal a sharply dressed driver standing beside a sleek black car idling on the curb. "Come on, Emma," Mr. Darrow said, scooping her up effortlessly. She leaned her head against his chest, her eyes fluttering closed as exhaustion overtook her. As they stepped into the hallway, Mr. Darrow paused and looked back at Marcus. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied. Mr. Darrow nodded. "I'll be in touch." The door closed behind them, leaving Marcus standing in the middle of the room, unsure of what had just happened. The following morning, Marcus woke to the sound of his mom bustling around the kitchen. The smell of burnt toast and instant coffee filled the air, a familiar start to their day. "You're up early," his mom said, glancing at him as she tied her apron. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning houses and waiting tables, her face lined with exhaustion that no amount of sleep could erase. "Yeah," Marcus said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Something happened yesterday." He recounted the story of Emma, leaving out the part where Mr. Darrow had been less than kind at first. His mom stopped what she was doing, her brows furrowing. "You did the right thing, Marcus. But you've got to be careful. People like him, they're not always fair to people like us." "I know," Marcus said, "but Emma's just a kid. She needed help." Before his mom could respond, there was a knock at the door. Marcus froze. They rarely had visitors, and the few times they did, it wasn't good news. He opened the door cautiously, his heart racing. Standing on the stoop was Mr. Darrow, his imposing presence filling the space. Behind him, a delivery van idled on the street. "Mr. Darrow?" Marcus said, his voice tinged with surprise. "Good morning, Marcus," Mr. Darrow said, his tone more measured than the night before. "I wanted to thank you properly for saving Emma. She's doing well, by the way. The doctor said she'll be fine." "That's good," Marcus said. Unsure where this was going, Mr. Darrow gestured toward the van. "I also wanted to bring you something, a small token of my gratitude." The driver opened the van's doors, revealing boxes of food, clothing, and even a brand new space heater. Marcus stared in shock. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Mr. Darrow said. "Just accept it. It's the least I can do." At that moment, Marcus's mom appeared behind him, her face a mix of confusion and gratitude. "Mr. Darrow, this is so generous." Mr. Darrow nodded. "Your son is a remarkable young man. If there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask." As the driver began unloading the boxes, Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions. Gratitude? Yes, but also a sense of unease. He didn't know why Mr. Darrow was being so generous, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their interaction. In the days that followed, Marcus and his mom adjusted to the sudden abundance that Mr. Darrow's generosity had brought into their lives. The refrigerator, once a place of sparse rations, was now stocked with fresh food. Marcus had a new pair of boots to replace his worn-out sneakers, and the space heater had transformed their chilly apartment into a warm, inviting space. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter with Mr. Darrow wasn't entirely resolved. He had saved Emma, sure, but it felt like there was something unfinished between them. That feeling lingered as Marcus. When he was arriving home later that day, he was greeted by a sight that stopped him in his tracks. Parked outside their building was a sleek black car, unmistakably the same one Mr. Darrow had arrived in before. Marcus's mom stood at the door, talking with Mr. Darrow himself, her arms crossed in a mix of curiosity and caution. "What's going on?" Marcus asked as he approached. His mom turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Darrow stopped by again. He says he has an offer for you." Marcus's stomach tightened. "An offer?" Mr. Darrow nodded. His usual air of authority softened slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, Marcus. About how you stepped up when no one else did. That kind of courage isn't something you see every day, especially in someone your age." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would have done." "Maybe," Mr. Darrow said, his tone serious, "but the reality is most people didn't. You did, and I want to help you." Marcus blinked, unsure how to respond. "Help me how?" Mr. Darrow glanced at Marcus's mom, then back at him. "You have potential, Marcus, but I can see that life hasn't been easy for you or your family. I'd like to offer you a job, a real one, at my company." Marcus's mom's eyes widened. "At Darrow Enterprises?" Mr. Darrow nodded. "We have a mentorship program for young people with promise. It's designed to give them exposure to different departments, teach them about business, and set them on a path to success. I think Marcus would be a perfect candidate." Marcus stared at him, the weight of the offer sinking in. A part of him wanted to say yes immediately. The idea of stepping into a world so different from his own was thrilling, but another part of him hesitated. "Why me?" he asked. Mr. Darrow smiled faintly. "Because you deserve a chance, and because I owe you for saving Emma. Consider it my way of paying it forward." Marcus glanced at his mom, whose expression had softened into one of cautious hope. "It's your decision, Marcus," she said gently. After a long pause, Marcus finally nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Mr. Darrow extended his hand, and Marcus shook it firmly, a mix of nerves and excitement coursing through him. The following week, Marcus found himself standing in the gleaming lobby of Darrow Enterprises. The sheer size of the building was overwhelming, with its towering glass walls and the constant buzz of activity. Dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks Mr. Darrow had sent over, Marcus felt both out of place and strangely determined. He was introduced to several employees who ran the mentorship program, including Ms. Holloway, a sharp-eyed woman who wasted no time putting him to work. "You'll start in the mailroom," she said briskly. "It's not glamorous, but it's where everyone begins. From there, you'll have opportunities to shadow other departments and learn how the company operates." Marcus nodded, grateful for the opportunity. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus found himself adapting to the routine. He delivered packages, sorted mail, and learned the inner workings of the company. But what surprised him most was how much he enjoyed it. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger, like he had a purpose. One afternoon, as Marcus was delivering a package to the executive floor, he ran into Emma in the hallway. She was accompanied by her nanny, but her face lit up when she saw him. "Marcus!" she called out, running up to him. "Hey, Emma," he said, smiling. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she said. "Thanks to you?" Her nanny gave Marcus a polite nod before leading Emma away, but the encounter left him feeling lighter. One day, as Marcus was leaving the building, he spotted Mr. Darrow waiting by the entrance. "Marcus," he said, motioning him over. "Yes, sir?" Mr. Darrow studied him for a moment. "You've been doing well. I've heard good things from Ms. Holloway." "Thank you," Marcus said, unsure where this was leading. "I wanted to ask you something," Mr. Darrow continued. "Have you thought about what you want to do in the future, beyond this program?" Marcus hesitated. "Not really. I mean, I'd like to do something that matters. Something that helps people, like you've helped me." Mr. Darrow's expression softened. "That's a good goal, and I think you're capable of achieving it." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his grip firm but encouraging. "Keep working hard. Opportunities have a way of finding people who are ready for them." Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of determination. For the first time in his life, he believed that maybe, just maybe, his future could be different. The days turned into weeks, and Marcus's life began to settle into a rhythm he'd never known before. His role at Darrow Enterprises expanded, and he was no longer just the kid in the mailroom. Mr. Darrow arranged for Marcus to shadow different departments, giving him a first-hand look at marketing strategies, financial planning, and even philanthropic initiatives. One evening, Marcus found himself in the company's conference room, sorting through files for an upcoming presentation. It was a quiet moment, the hum of the city beyond the towering glass windows his only companion. He'd come to appreciate these still moments when he could reflect on how far he'd come. But as much as his life had improved, there was an itch of uncertainty he couldn't quite scratch. That uncertainty manifested one Friday evening as Marcus walked home from the office. The streets of his neighborhood were dimly lit, and the familiar cracks in the pavement seemed sharper under the flickering streetlights. He was carrying a small stack of papers, notes he'd been reviewing for a new project. Suddenly, a group of older boys emerged from an alleyway. Marcus recognized them instantly. They were familiar faces from his old life. Guys he'd avoided back when survival meant keeping your head down and your hands to yourself. "Well, look who it is," one of them sneered, stepping in front of Marcus. His name was Ray, and he'd always been the leader of their pack. "All dressed up and fancy. Forget about us little people?" Marcus's grip on his papers tightened. "I don't want any trouble, Ray." Ray laughed, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Trouble? Nah, we're just catching up. Been hearing rumors about you, Marcus. Big-time job with Darrow Enterprises, huh? Must be rolling in it now." Before Marcus could respond, one of Ray's friends snatched the stack of papers from his hands and tossed them to the ground. Another stepped closer, invading Marcus's space. "Bet he's got cash on him," the second boy said, his voice low and menacing. Marcus's heart raced. "I don't. I swear." Ray smirked, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his shirt. "See, that's the thing, Marcus. You've got something we don't. A shot at something better. And that's not fair, is it?" As the words left Ray's mouth, Marcus knew reasoning with him was useless. These weren't just taunts. They were the product of jealousy and frustration. The same feelings Marcus himself had wrestled with before his life had changed. Before things could escalate, the sound of sirens cut through the tension. Ray and his crew froze, glancing at one another before shoving Marcus backward and scattering into the night. Shaken, Marcus gathered his papers from the ground and hurried home, his thoughts a whirlwind. The encounter rattled him, not just because of the fear, but because he saw pieces of his old self in Ray's anger. The next morning, Marcus hesitated before telling his mom about the incident. She was already juggling so much, working extra shifts to save up for their future. But when she noticed the tear in his shirt and the uneasy look in his eyes, she pressed him. "Marcus, you need to be careful," she said after he explained. "You've worked too hard to let anyone drag you back down." "I know," Marcus said, but the weight of the encounter lingered. He brought it up with Mr. Darrow during their weekly mentorship check-in. "I ran into some people from my old neighborhood," Marcus admitted, choosing his words carefully. "They didn't take kindly to seeing me dressed like this. Working here." Mr. Darrow leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Jealousy is a powerful thing, Marcus. When people see someone breaking free from the same circumstances they're trapped in, it can stir up resentment." "What am I supposed to do about it?" Marcus asked. "I don't want trouble." "You stay the course," Mr. Darrow said firmly. "You've earned your place here, and if anyone gives you trouble, you let me know." Despite the reassurance, Marcus couldn't shake the nagging feeling that his past wasn't done with him. A week later, that feeling was confirmed. Marcus was walking home again, this time in the early evening, when he noticed Ray leaning against a lamppost near his building. This time, Ray wasn't alone. A man Marcus didn't recognize, a rough-looking guy in his 40s, stood beside him. Marcus's instincts told him to keep walking, but Ray called out, "Hey, Marcus! Meet my buddy Trent. He's got a business proposition for you." Marcus paused, his stomach sinking. "I'm not interested." "Oh, I think you'll want to hear this," Ray said, stepping closer. "See, Trent here has a way of making sure everyone gets a piece of the pie. You're doing so well for yourself now, Marcus. It's only fair you share the wealth." Trent stepped forward, his voice low and gravelly. "What Ray's trying to say is, it'd be a shame if anything happened to you. Or your mom." The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. Marcus's mind raced. He knew what they were asking for: a cut of his paycheck, a way to milk him for money. "I don't have anything for you," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. Trent smirked. "We'll see about that." They walked away, leaving Marcus to grapple with the weight of their warning. That night, Marcus called Mr. Darrow, his hands trembling as he recounted what had happened. "Stay home tomorrow," Mr. Darrow said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll take care of this." The next day, Marcus and his mom stayed in their apartment, the tension palpable. True to his word, Mr. Darrow acted swiftly. By noon, private security was stationed near their building, discreet but present. Within days, Trent and Ray's presence in the neighborhood vanished. Mr. Darrow had made it clear to the authorities and other influential figures in the community that Marcus and his family were off-limits. In the weeks that followed, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he'd come and the support system he now had. He attended mentorship sessions with a renewed focus, determined to make the most of every opportunity. As he sat in a meeting with Mr. Darrow one afternoon, the older man handed him a thick envelope. "What's this?" Marcus asked, confused. "A scholarship," Mr. Darrow said. "For college. You've got a bright future ahead, Marcus, and I want to make sure you have every chance to succeed." Marcus stared at the envelope, his throat tightening. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," Mr. Darrow said with a smile. "Just pay it forward one day." Marcus left the office that day with a sense of purpose stronger than ever. His journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over yet, but for the first time, he felt like he was truly moving forward. And no matter what challenges came his way, he knew he had the strength and the support to face them head-on. Marcus sat in his college dorm room, staring at the stack of textbooks on his desk. The room was small and plain, but to him, it felt like a palace, a space entirely his own, something he never thought he'd have. The smell of instant coffee lingered in the air, and the hum of conversation drifted through the thin walls. Life had changed so drastically over the past few years that sometimes he barely recognized himself. He had gone from shivering in the cold and scraping by to thriving in an environment where people believed in his potential. College wasn't just a chance for a degree. It was an escape, an opportunity to rewrite the story of his life. Yet even in this newfound comfort, Marcus never forgot the people who had helped him get here. His mom and Mr. Darrow, whose generosity and guidance had made everything possible. One brisk autumn afternoon, Marcus was heading out to meet his mom for dinner when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Mr. Darrow. "Are you free to meet tomorrow? I have something I'd like to discuss." Curiosity bubbled up inside him as he typed back, "Sure, what time?" The response came almost immediately, setting the meeting for the next day at Darrow Enterprises. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Whenever Mr. Darrow reached out, it wasn't for small talk. It always meant something significant. The following afternoon, Marcus stepped into the towering glass building that housed Darrow Enterprises. No matter how many times he visited, the sheer scale and sleekness of the place never failed to awe him. The lobby bustled with professionals in tailored suits, the air buzzing with purpose. Marcus adjusted his own button-down shirt, one of the nicer ones his mom had bought him before he started college, and took a deep breath. "Marcus Harris," he told the receptionist. "I'm here to see Mr. Darrow." She smiled and gestured toward the elevators. "He's expecting you. Take the express lift to the top floor." The elevator ride was swift and silent, the kind that made your stomach drop as it ascended. When the doors opened, Marcus was greeted by the familiar sight of the executive floor: polished wood, walls lined with abstract art, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city skyline. Mr. Darrow's assistant led him into the large conference room, where the man himself was waiting. "Marcus," Mr. Darrow said warmly, extending his hand. "It's good to see you. How's college?" "Great," Marcus replied as they shook hands. "It's been a lot of work, but I'm really enjoying it." "I'm glad to hear that," Mr. Darrow said, motioning for Marcus to sit. "I've been keeping tabs on your progress. Your professors speak highly of you." "Thank you, sir," Marcus said, feeling a flush of pride. Mr. Darrow leaned back in his chair, his expression growing thoughtful. "You've come a long way, Marcus. From the moment you stepped up to help Emma, I've seen something in you that's rare, a combination of courage, determination, and integrity. Those qualities are hard to find." Marcus shifted in his seat, unsure of how to respond. "I called you here because I have a proposition," Mr. Darrow continued. "You're already on a promising path, but I want to offer you something that could accelerate your growth even further." Marcus blinked, his heart racing. "What kind of proposition?" Mr. Darrow placed a sleek portfolio on the table and slid it toward Marcus. "Once you graduate, I want you to join Darrow Enterprises full-time. We'll help cover the rest of your tuition, and in return, you'll enter our Leadership Development Program. It's a comprehensive track designed to groom future leaders, exposure to various departments, mentorship from senior executives, and the chance to lead real projects." Marcus stared at the portfolio, the weight of the offer sinking in. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Completely," Mr. Darrow said. "I see potential in you, Marcus. This isn't charity, it's an investment. I believe you have what it takes to succeed, and I want to be part of your journey." Marcus hesitated. The offer was incredible, almost too good to be true. But a small part of him still doubted. "Why me?" he asked finally. "There are so many people out there. Why give this chance to me?" Mr. Darrow leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Because you've earned it. You've shown me what you're capable of, not just through hard work, but through your character. You're someone who acts when others stand still, and that's a rare quality. The sincerity in Mr. Darrow's words left Marcus speechless. After a long pause, he nodded. "All right, I'll do it." A genuine smile broke across Mr. Darrow's face. "Good. I have no doubt you'll make the most of this opportunity." The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. Marcus juggled his college workload while preparing for what lay ahead at Darrow Enterprises. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, each step closer to graduation bringing him nearer to a future he hadn't dared to dream of just a few years ago. On the day of his graduation, Marcus stood on the stage in his cap and gown, looking out at the crowd. His mom was there, her face glowing with pride, tears glistening in her eyes. Beside her sat Mr. Darrow, who gave Marcus a subtle nod as their eyes met. It was a moment Marcus would never forget, a culmination of struggle, resilience, and unwavering support. As he walked across the stage to accept his diploma, he felt the weight of his journey settle on his shoulders. It wasn't just a piece of paper he held in his hand. It was proof that change was possible, that he was capable of more than he'd ever imagined. A week later, Marcus stepped into his new role at Darrow Enterprises. The mentorship program was rigorous but exhilarating. He immersed himself in projects that challenged him, learned from some of the brightest minds in the industry, and grew in ways he hadn't thought possible. Mr. Darrow continued to be a guiding presence, offering advice and encouragement when Marcus needed it most. And Emma, now a spirited teenager, would occasionally drop by the office, her laughter a reminder of the day everything had changed. One evening, after a long day of work, Marcus stood by the window of his office, gazing out at the city lights. He thought about where he'd started, the cold, the hunger, the loneliness, and how far he'd come. His life was no longer defined by struggle. It was defined by opportunity and hope. But most importantly, it was defined by the people who had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. And as Marcus turned back to his desk, a small smile playing on his lips, he knew his story wasn't over. It was just beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring tales like this one. See you in the next story.